I'm going to kill somebody in this thing.
Right.
And you're driving a 4,000 to 5,000 pound object, 80 to 100 miles an hour, we know you're speeding, down the road, and you're just doing it on autopilot. How many times have you come home from work and you're like, I have no idea how I got here?
Yeah.
We've habituated our ability to do this. When we're 16 years old and we're learning where the gas pedal is, we're freaking out. And then we're just like sitting there cruising on our phones and all this other stuff. It's crazy. How does this work? Well, first and foremost, we have the habit mind, which is our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is where our programming lives. It is not personal, meaning there's no personality in there. So when I say it's not personal, I'm just saying it's matter of fact. It is conditioned coding. We are loaded and coded with this stuff. We typically load something in there through the process of repetition.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Life Unchained show. I'm Danielle Laura here with Chris Delaney, and we are so excited to give you guys this next version in our series, our part 2 in our series of our roadmap to clarity. So if you didn't catch the episode from last week, I encourage you to go and check that out, because this week we are piggybacking on that. So this week we are talking about the second phase in the roadmap to clarity, which is unlearning. So in the last video, we talked about once we know better, then what do we do to release those conditioned beliefs that we've been taught our entire lives as to why we can't do something, or why we're not ready, or why we're not deserving of it, all of that.
Yeah.
And I know a huge part of this, Chris, has to do with our subconscious and unconscious mind, because that is what rules the show most of the time.
Yeah.
And I know you love talking about this stuff. It's a huge part of the study that you did to get to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about, how do you even begin this unlearning process?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, the story for me was, again, being a college dropout. I'm not smart enough to understand this stuff. What a story. But yeah, I'm obsessed with understanding how the human minds, I shouldn't say the human mind, I should say the minds, right?
Yeah.
Because when we start actually taking a conscious look at the minds this is an interesting thing, doesn't even reside in the body. It's beyond the body. When we talk about the brain, separate from the mind, very, very different. So this is going to be kind of in depth. You're going to want to grab some pen and paper, right? But this is,
awesome.
I'm going to give like a quick overview of this. So what we want to understand is that there's rules of the game that I like to say, which is our brain is designed to be an association device. Evolutionarily, it's designed to keep us alive. The brain wants to stay alive. It's in the skull, so it is like just getting sensory information. Over time, we've designed like these sophisticated systems that help us, like pain, like fight or flight response, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, to allow us to basically stay alive. Now, what that does is we tend to think the brain is so intelligent, but we forget about things like our bodies. Our bodies are hyper intelligent. Somatic response feeds into that. Then there's the mind itself.
Wait, I'm going to pause you for a second.
Yep.
That's a really important point that I want people to understand. Our bodies are hyper intelligent, and our bodies always know before our minds do. So when we're feeling pain in the body in some way, right? It's an indicator that there is something deeper going on either a conscious, unconscious, or subconscious level that is trying to get our attention,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. So let's think about it this way, right? Because we're going to be talking a little about habit formation and habituation, so to speak. And this is important. What can be learned can be unlearned and then reprogrammed.
Yep.
So it's like wiping your hard drive clean and adding a new system in there, right? So we're going to upgrade our systems. So when we think about something that would be a quick and easy example, think about driving a car. When you get up, you go to your car and you get it started and you go drive. You don't freak out thinking, holy crap, I'm going to kill somebody in this thing.
Right.
And you're driving a 4,000 to 5,000 pound object, 80 to 100 miles an hour, we know you're speeding, down the road, and you're just doing it on autopilot. How many times have you come home from work and you're like, I have no idea how I got here?
Yeah.
We've habituated our ability to do this. When we're 16 years old and we're learning where the gas pedal is, we're freaking out. And then we're just like sitting there cruising on our phones and all this other stuff. It's crazy. How does this work? Well, first and foremost, we have the habit mind, which is our subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is where our programming lives. It is not personal, meaning there's no personality in there. So when I say it's not personal, I'm just saying it's matter of fact. It is conditioned coding. We are loaded and coded with this stuff. We typically load something in there through the process of repetition. And that comes through meaningful repetition, meaning we're adding a little bit of emotion in the process while we're repetitively doing a task. If you're an athlete, you know what I'm saying. You go to the gym and you literally do the same jumper every single time. You're doing the same process over and over until it becomes what we call unconsciously competent.
Right.
Or just literally, you call my name Chris and I look.
Right.
I don't have to think about it. There's no taxing on my brain. Why does that matter? Because the brain wants to conserve calories. The brain is designed to keep us alive. We need calories. So it doesn't want to do much. It's lazy, right? So it associates things quickly. That matters because when you see a headline on Instagram or you see somebody dressed well or whatever, immediately your brain associates it with something else and creates a quick response, and you have an automatic response.
Right.
Most times it is to ignore or to just move on. What we're talking here is about conscious reprogramming. So the understanding is that our conscious mind, not the subconscious, the conscious mind is the thing throughout the day that is sense driven. Touch, feel, taste, hearing, right? That's the sensory input that we're getting. We don't think much about it, but it only rules about 5% of our day in our decision making. The subconscious mind is doing all this stuff behind the scenes. It is our pattern recognition. It is our patterns. It is all of our habits that make us us. And those are built also into our belief systems, which we'll talk about in a second. But people think that they're conscious throughout the day. And I got to tell you guys, we have 70 to 80,000 thoughts is like the current number.
Yep.
Most of those, we have no idea what's happening. So what's really happening when we slow down is cognitive psychologists say that we have anywhere from 150 to 500 open loops of things like tabs in our minds that we then come to the awareness of, and it becomes chaos.
Yeah, the image that I get when you say that, Chris, is kind of like when you have, I have an iPhone, right? So when you have your phone, you have all these tabs that are open, but you forget that they're open. So they're draining your battery. And then you go through and you click out all the apps and you realize how many things you had open. It's kind of similar to how our brains are working on that subconscious level. The browsers are always open. We may not know they're there.
Right. Yeah, and so let's talk about learning real quick. So learning is important, right? We talked about subconscious mind, the habit mind, which, by the way, the subconscious is like light speed. It, like, no joke, it is rapidly learning all the time and just storing information. What's in your environment, what you see or do not see, tends to be focused into the subconscious mind. We talked a little about auto-suggestion, which is when you see certain words, subliminal suggestion, big stuff. The conscious mind is focused on the stuff that's sense-driven, right? So you have the bus and the bus driver, right? The bus is the conscious mind. The bus driver is the subconscious mind.
Write that down.
Yeah.
That's good.
So that's a big one to understand. So when you're talking to your kids and you want them to learn differently, put them in a room and have something playing in the background, like some Jim Rohn or something, and let them hear that but not realize what's happening, right? So in learning, I've always loved Dr. Maslow's 4 stages of learning.
Yeah.
And again, this is in our guide as well, the Clarity Roadmap. So if you're not getting this right now, this is totally fine, but I want you to understand this really quickly. What we start to realize is when we say, I know, my assertion is really we're just aware of something. Because oftentimes, we've all done it, we will contextually pick up cues and we will actually become an expert on something without knowing anything.
That's a really good point. Because how many times have you caught yourself, I know I'm guilty of this, being like, I know, I shouldn't be doing this, but then you keep doing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so what ends up happening is we tend to say I know so we can move on, right? We just want to get away with it. I know, right? So the question is to slow down because our language tells us what we're seeing in our inside world. So language is the first thing I look for from somebody. It gives me an internal frame of reference. But there's 4 phases of learning, and it starts with unconscious incompetence. Now, if you hear the word incompetence and you think I'm dumb, realize words have no emotion. We've been associating emotions with words. Unconscious incompetence really just means I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
It's like I had no clue that certain things existed. It's like people used to ask me, do you like sushi? And I was like, no, I don't like sushi. Like, have you tried it? No, but I can tell you I don't like it.
Right.
How do you know? So the question has to be, how do I know? Right? The next phase of learning, once I go there and I'm aware of it, is I become consciously incompetent, which is now I'm aware. Now I realize there's a gap in learning and I have to make a decision. Do I want to learn more or do I not care, right? But then the conscious learning process happens. This is where people who master things make things happen. This is repetition. This is the way we overwrite the subconscious mind, which is through constant repetition and meaningful repetition, which is why when you're in the gym and you're fueled and you're fired up by saying, I'm tired of the way my body feels, and it's not just vanity, but just how I feel personally, and I just force myself to go every single day, you'll realize that over time, over the hump, it gets way easier. And you will literally begin to just get up, fired up, ready to go to the gym, which is a great one. Most people fall short because they fall into the process of friction in the habit forming process. Most people believe habits form in 21 days. I hate that. People read the memes on Instagram and they're like, 21 days for a habit. I'm like, not even close. Research shows that it's as little as 21 days to as long as 266, an average of 66 days, but even further, right? Malcolm Gladwell, an outlier, stated 10,000 hours of meaningful repetition brings you to mastery. That's where we want to get to. So then we go from conscious competence, the repetition, to unconscious competence, which is mastery. That is where it is literally just muscle memory. When you watch a guitar player, or you watch somebody who is just in communication and they're just flowing, or writing, or content creation, it is unconsciously competent, and that's where we've assimilated it into our subconscious mind, and now our brain no longer has to do the hard work, because the brain is sitting there saying, hey, slow down. I don't want to do this. This is really hard, right? So that's why I love to see the interplay between conscious habituation and actual neurology, because there's so much going on in there, and it's pretty complex. But we just have to know that there's that gap and that resistance that happens, so that we know and we come to an awareness. We have to say, do I really want to know this?
Right.
And that's where it becomes a really beautiful process.
Yeah, so it's like the whole phrase, once you know better, you can do better. Mm-hmm. But there's also an element of choice. Just because you know better doesn't mean you're going to actually do better. That's when your conscious mind can come in to consciously create the outcome that you desire. Right. So you do have to choose that you are going to do better once you know better.
Yeah, I love the fact, I think it was Dr. Joe Dispenza who said this once, and I love this. He said, there's no such thing as no risk. There's risks everywhere.
Yeah.
The difference is that our minds have habituated ourselves to not see the risk anymore. So we have a blind spot. So what this would look like is when you have a regular job and you're getting a paycheck, there's just as much risk as somebody who's an entrepreneur. It's just a different set of challenges. Mm-hmm. So I know this because when I had to terminate employees, their life was just coming to a crashing halt, because they never learned a strategy of what would happen once that income was disrupted. Mm-hmm. So those of us who became entrepreneurs, we were freaking out about money. It's just a different set of rules, right? So what that would look like is, instead of a guaranteed paycheck, right, now my goal is to create the probability of success of creating income. So that brings us to the next step, which is belief systems.
Yeah.
And this is a lot, guys. I'm trying to condense a lot of years into this, and I'm still trying to understand more about this.
But again, for reference, this will be in the Clarity Roadmap. So if you didn't download that before, you didn't see last week's episode, we'll drop that in the show notes. You guys can just download that straight, and it's a full e-guide explaining all of this in depth.
Yeah, and if you talk to me, you'll know that I will geek out on this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So because I was obsessed. I was like, if I learned these beliefs of I'm not smart enough because I didn't go to college, what about everything else, right? So the questions I ask are, where you went to college. Surely you went to all 58,000 colleges to choose the one you went to. What about your spouse? Surely you dated all 7 billion people in the world to find your spouse. Why do we do the things that we have to start asking why we do what we do?
Yeah.
Chances are where you live is based on a belief. Everything is beliefs, right? So in the wake of decision, we often go with what we feel worthy or deserving of.
Yep.
That's big. Write that one down. Mm-hmm. In the wake of decision, or without decision, we fall into what we feel worthy or deserving of.
Yeah. I was just saying, where does that come from, right? Where do we believe that we are worthy or deserving? Like, where do those beliefs come from? Yeah. Typically from conditioning.
Yeah. Education, experience, environment. 3 E's, right? Education, experience, and environment. So when we're born, we're nothing but subconscious mind. We're all tactile and sensing, and we're pure, right? We learn these filters through our decision making from our parents. The first people in our lives, our fathers, our mothers, we learned about intimacy, authority, money, power, sexuality, all these various things before we're even old enough to understand death.
Right.
And then what happens is we start to reinforce these beliefs in our environment, and then we start to actually create by acting in our environment. So we are, in fact, unconsciously creating our circumstances. Massive, massive, mind-blowing understanding when this came into my realm of awareness, because then I could say, man, holy crap, that's my fault. But now I have a choice, because what I've learned, what you're telling me is through the same process, I can create something new. I'm signing up for that class. There was nothing more important to me. So I started saying, what do I want? I had to unlearn the process. Yeah. And here's the messy part of it too, is that we begin to unlearn Because some of these things are foundational to our identity.
Right.
Who we believe that we are, the ego, right? The stories that we believe have to be laid down.
Yeah.
And that's where the awakening that we're going to talk about next week that I know you're passionate about is like the process of like getting down to the foundation. You're ripping all the way down to the studs in the house and you're saying, what kind of house do I want, right? What I get so passionate about this because when I see somebody begin, it starts to click. And it's not going to happen right away. It's going to happen over the course of about 30 days of working together. They're going to start seeing subtle shifts in their environment. Their business might be doing much better, right? Their relationships might be much more fruitful and qualitative. Their physical health might change because they're starting to see a little bit differently. And they're starting to open up to clarity of understanding. And they're executing differently because we're facilitating a new education experience or environment. Now, here's the way you change belief systems. There's only 2 ways that we know of. The first one is the non-sexy way, right? We talked about repetition, the slog through the mud. You have to want the change. You have to fire yourself up internally, not externally. It has to be for you. Because if those external reasons go away, like a relationship, you will lose them. So it has to be internally focused. So repetition over the course of time. The second way is an intense emotional experience. It is like I have a heart attack after eating a burger. A doctor says, if you put a fry in your mouth, your heart will explode. I look at my wife and I say, I'm eating kale. That's where the shift and the change happens because all of a sudden, everything shifted. It was like an intense awakening, shaking awake. So with that said, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to you right now after this awareness of the nudge to pursue the nudge? And you're going to start seeing new information. You're going to hear about things like energetics, spirituality, consciousness. You're going to hear about new ways of operating within your finances and your relationship. You're going to learn about things like, what about this one? What about this belief? Would you like this one? What comes easiest to you should be the thing you get paid the most for. What comes easiest to you is the thing that you should get paid the most for. What if that was a belief in your life right now that you were literally able to internalize and it was automatic for you? What would your life look like if you were automatically driven to find the optimization between your physical, mental, emotional, and conscious capacity? It's a game changer. And that is like a lifelong pursuit that gets me fired up, right?
Absolutely, me too. So I'm excited. Thank you so much, Chris, for going in depth with that. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Comment below. You can email us, reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram. Everything that Chris just talked about is going to be in the Clarity Roadmap Guide. We'll link that in the show notes as well. You can go ahead and download that, totally free. You can download that and start working through that for yourself as well. And we are so excited. We will go into our next phase next week, our part 3 in the series. So make sure you stay tuned. Go ahead and hit subscribe so you make sure you get the notification when that drops.
Yeah, listen, no greater work will be done than when you make a decision to change, to unlearn, and to learn something new for yourself, because it is all about you and making your life your own. No matter what, you can make your life your own. You can start living life unchained. And I appreciate you guys spending time with us. We love you. We'll talk to you
see you soon.
Bye.